Okay, good morning. I am here, Architects of Change Live, conversations with change makers who are moving humanity forward. And I'm so happy today to welcome Erin Falconer with this book and so much more, How to Get S-H-T, Good Catholic Girl Done, How to Get Shit Done, Why Women Need to Stop Doing Everything So They Can Achieve Anything. And I was just telling Erin, welcome. She's also the editor of Pick Your Brain, which is a blog, and she also has a podcast called Pick the Brain, and I'm going to pick her brain this morning. But I told her that I was reading this book, and I laughed out loud. I was laughing out loud. And so welcome.
Thank
you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you said you're like the first person to do a productivity book for women.
Yeah, I mean, I looked around, and when I was approached to write this book,
was this title your idea?
It was. I toggled between this and the pop effect, which I talk about in the book.
Yes.
And then
explain the pop effect.
Well, the pop effect basically stands for, the P stands for personality, O stands for opportunity, and the second P stands for productivity. And the idea is you need to understand who you are and where you are in life in order to truly create a roadmap for personal productivity. In other words, not just getting a lot of stuff done, but getting the stuff that's personally important to you done.
So is that something you think that's particular to women? They try to get a lot of stuff done and then end up feeling like, I'm not doing anything. I've had that.
Yeah, yes, I really do. First and foremost, I think it's something that's more hardwired in women, just this sense of constantly want to be doing more, getting stuff done, brains constantly going,
Right.
and not really able, in the way that men are, to compartmentalize.
Right.
So, like, when they're done, they're done. For me, at least, and I kind of saw this around the office where I worked, I would be done something, but then I'd be constantly thinking, like, oh, I could have done that differently. I could have done that. It could have been better this way. And so you're constantly taking more and more and more forward with you.
Right.
So I think that's kind of hardwired. But then also, women are relatively new to the workplace. I mean, if you think about like 50 years, that's not a lot of time. We're still not equal, obviously, and so there's a lot of this need to be proving ourselves.
Right.
There's a lot of guilt-based decision making and action, and there's also a lot of stuff done out of fear, like if I don't do this, somebody will come in and replace me, or
there's some truth to that.
Right. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a paranoid fear, it's a real fear.
Right,
in a lot of cases. So I do think that this is, for those couple of reasons, women are in the position where we're just, and again, at least I was, where I was just racking things up, getting things done, and instead of getting a lot of stuff done so that I could free up my day and enjoy life and reflect on life and create
mother,
and do all of that stuff, I was freeing time up to just get more stuff done.
So there are a lot of women out there, right, who are raising kids, taking care of aging parents, running businesses or going to work for businesses. What do you think are the 3 things they should know today?
Well, I think the first thing is, no matter where you are in life, you need to stop and take stock of how you got there and where you're going.
I think I write a lot about stopping, not just at New Year's or not before New Year's, but really stopping and going, let's assess. Am I happy?
Yeah.
Is this working? Am I being productive? Am I in the right place?
Yeah. What's important to me?
Right. So do you kind of advise people to write down what they value, what's important, and then to see, I call it the pie chart, but then to see, like, am I spending my time with what I value? And people then say, like, well, I want to spend my time with my kids, but I, got to pay my bills.
Right. So I absolutely do. First and foremost, I am a massive believer in writing things down, not living in your head.
Right.
It's actually being concrete. As soon as you put those words to paper or you type something, into your Word doc, you become accountable to that. And when things are living in your head, there's no accountability. It's a thought that can easily come in, come out, be replaced, but there's nothing that you can come back to at the end of the day and say, did I do this? Does this matter to me? Blah, 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 blah.
So your advice is, first and foremost, take stock, write it down.
Write it down. And actually in the book,
Yes,
I have exercises at the end of each chapter, especially the one at the end of the first chapter, which asks you the kind of big, meaningful questions, as we were talking about. How did you get here? What's important to you? What's your moral compass like? What makes you happy? What do you feel you're really good at and excited about? And so all those questions. And once you start writing these things down, you start being able to formulate a more clear, concrete understanding of who you are, right?
Right.
Which is really, really important
to
understanding how you got where you are and ultimately where you want to go. The second really important thing to this, though, is to your point of somebody saying, I want to spend time with the kids, but I got to pay the bills. The thing is that so many of us, and this is both men and women, are on automatic pilot 24/7.
Right.
They've got no idea how they're spending their time. And if you actually took the time to sit down and critically analyze how you're spending your time, you would be shocked. And so I talk about a 7-day time challenge in the book, where from the start of day 1 to the end of day 7, you literally write down every single thing you're doing, except for like going to the bathroom or showering, stuff like that.
When you wrote that down, what did you discover?
Well, I was shocked to discover how much time I was giving away to other people, right? So, taking calls in the middle of the day from an upset friend that happens to always be calling me, the one upset friend that I always take the call for. Or I was somehow got in charge of ordering, in the office people have birthdays, obviously, like ordering the lunch for the birthday person that week, or sitting in traffic for an hour because I felt it was really important for me to get to the office, to be the first one in my office all the time. But if I had just decided to be there half an hour late, I would have shaved 30 minutes off my commute. So that 30 minutes, because I had a false sense of like, I must be in the first person in the office, actually cost me, an extra 30 minutes in traffic. That depletes my energy sitting in traffic for an extra half an hour. So then when I arrive, I'm not as, fresh as I could be. So when you put your list of who you are, what's important to you, and where you want to go, and you put how you've spent your time for 7 days, and you look at the two of them, you're going to see how much they do not align. And so that is critical. Those are the 2 steps, in my opinion, to if somebody wants to start right now, that you can do, that you can start then crafting a plan that you put more and more of the things on your calendar that mean something to you and move the needle for you personally forward, and you start in a very calculated way minimizing and marginalizing the things that don't do those.
So what I thought was also super interesting about Erin, and in the book, you talk about, in a way, falling into the job of being editor-in-chief of your blog. And what I liked about this was I see so many people saying, well, I'm not going to take that job because it pays little or it's beneath me, because of what I really want to do is up here. And tell the story a little bit, because I think it's so important. You are basically about to give up on your desire to be a writer, your desire to, make your own way by your writing. So you took this job that was below you in your mind, right? And you started like working on this blog, which was like,
which was nothing. So I'll just give a really short context to that. I, growing up my whole life, I'm from Canada, was a very type A personality, very into getting straight A's, very academic, was fast tracking on the way to law school.
Perfection track.
And I had this little voice inside me that kept coming up louder and louder and louder, that was like, try writing, try performing, so I was doing this kind of fast track academically, but then I kept increasing the amount of time that I would spend doing different creative endeavors, to the point where right when I was about to go to law school, I was like, I gotta give this a try. So
you listened to
I listened to my inner voice. I spent a couple years in Toronto writing and performing, and then I decided, if I really want to make a go of this, I'm going to move to LA.
You have a very funny story about telling her parents that. So if you ever are trying to follow your voice and you're afraid to talk to the people who love you, who might think you're crazy, you should read the intro of Who Am I? But go ahead.
And so I moved to LA.
Right.
Cut to 8 years later, I had no money, no car, no job. My house was about to be foreclosed upon, and my visa was up. And
so pause a minute. Repeat that. No money.
No money.
No job. no house,
no car,
no car,
in LA,
no visa.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't get worse than that.
Doesn't get worse than this, short of a health scare or a death. Does not get worse than this. And I was literally, like out of the movies, in the fetal position, crying on my bathroom floor, saying, how did I get here? And it wasn't a question of, I didn't have any of those things. The reason I was crying and so upset was that I had listened to this voice, which is supposed to be your true north. And like, that's the truth. And it had seemed to have failed me. And when you have that moment saying, like, this true voice failed me, that is terrifying. That is a very unhappy and scary place to be. And so I was wrestling with that, and really I had no option but to go back to Canada with my tail between my legs, or frantically try and come up with something fast. And so I was like, I just can't believe this voice would be wrong, And so within 48 hours, I fired off 100 emails through Craigslist.
So that's also a really important thing I like to say to all my kids' friends and stuff. You took the initiative. You had one foot on your way back home, but you said, let me make an effort and try. Okay, just send out massive emails. Try.
Exactly. So I sent out 100 emails. I got one response back, which was to be a copywriter at a self-improvement startup. And this is in about 2008, 8, and the internet is just really starting to take off. This is not the writing job I came to Los Angeles for. $15 an hour, no benefits, nothing.
And I was perfectionist in here is going, beneath me.
Way beneath me. And I was like, what do I do? Do I go back to Canada or do I take this job? I decided to continue to listen to the voice, and was like, I'm going to take this job, but I have to make something out of it. I have to take this opportunity. I don't know what way I'm going to be able to do it, but I'll do it. And I took the job, and again, long story short, I was able to parlay that into an opportunity to run this blog called Pick the Brain. That wasn't the job I took.
But it basically, what I love about the story, and which I think is so great, is that you put a foot forward, and that foot leads to something else. So leads to the blog, it leads to the podcast, it leads to the book, it leads to everything you wanted.
Yes.
But you would never have gotten if you didn't say, all right, I'm going to take something that I think is beneath me.
Yeah, and I think the thing was I had the option to go backwards to Canada or take this move, which even though it was such a baby step, it was a baby step forward.
And you procrastinated about this book, which I thought was also really interesting, because I know a couple procrastinators. And they were like, someone came to you, suggested you write a book, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then you waited again, and then you finally kind of did it. Yeah. And it combines really, I think, self-improvement, understanding who you are, which is the bedrock of that movement, with business.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's a unique talent and a unique thing that you brought to this space.
Right, yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because I think so many of us want to be successful, but we don't know who we are.
Right.
And then we think like, oh, self-improvement.
Right.
But
and I think the thing is that even if you find success, that's not, and so many people think that success is going to bring them happiness.
Yes.
So many people have found success, but they still are not happy. And so back, just to reiterate again, it's so important to understand who you are and where you really want to go, because then you can attain success that actually is meaningful, as opposed to success in the vein of collecting trophies like I was out there doing for so long.
Yeah.
And those things are nice to talk about and nice to have, but they don't really mean something to you. They don't speak to your moral compass. They don't,
So what do you think is, you have, and I love it in this book, she's like, here's the drill, name 3 ways you're able to use the internet. You talk about how the internet changed the game for women, list your goals. So she gives you practical things to do. Where do you think we are for women right now at this point? We hear so much about women, the workplace, being believed, speaking up, not being believed, don't speak up, fear. Where do you feel that we are, since you kind of have your finger on that?
Well, when I started writing this book, I felt man, this is such an interesting, dynamic time for women, and I never could have predicted what was going to happen since the book has come out. It has been, now more than ever, this time it's a scary place to live in, but it's full of such great opportunities for meaningful change for women, where we are really finding our voice and finding a camaraderie with other women, which I think we've expedited change for ourselves in the last 6 months so rapidly. Of course, there's been a lot of, that has been born out of a lot of very negative situations, but I think that why a lot of this stuff has happened is that we have begun to speak to our truth, and we've kind of let go of a lot of the fear around that, and that's why a lot of major change has happened, right? And
how do you see that in your podcast and in your writing and the people that write for Pick the Brain?
Well, I mean, I think that there's just been a lot. First of all, in terms of the writing that has come through this and the guests that we've had on the podcast, they've been a lot more dynamic because they are speaking from a place of personal power that has never happened before. And
so your guests are more energetic.
Yeah, absolutely. They're more energetic, and they're more what is the word? They won't compromise who they are. And so there's an authenticity that's coming through both in interviews and in their work on the blog that I think is very, very compelling and exciting.
They're feeling kind of warrior self, protective of themselves, protective of their story.
And protective of their story, but also, I'm going to say this, whatever it is, and I don't care if it's popular, it's part of who I am, and not necessarily in talking about overcoming obstacles, but even when they're writing about self-confidence or productivity or time management, it's coming from a place that is far more true to who they are. And therefore, it becomes more compelling. So I've had great experience working with people that are really enthusiastic about being themselves, first and foremost.
So you write that this is a business book, really, for women. I would argue that it's actually a little bit more than a business book, because it's really a whole self book, right? That you can apply it to business. But you also say that even though it's for women, men can look at it, read it, and might learn something. Why do you want men to read this book?
Well, so there's two parts
to parts of it.
There's two. There's the first half of the book, which is called Be, and the second half of the book, which is Do. And so B is obviously B-E, not Z. And B is a little more about understanding where we as women have come from, our history in the workplace. And I think that's interesting in a way to men, because a lot of men don't really understand what we've gone through. And so I think from just an interest in understanding and having a better relationship with women and women in the workplace, that could be interesting. The second part, though, is very tactical. And so women, whether you're a woman or a man, these are very tactical exercises and practices that anybody can use to better get a handle on their own time management, on their relationships with other coworkers and personal relationships. And, it's kind of also a crash course in how to use the internet from a productivity standpoint. So that applies to both men or women.
So I've been talking to a lot of millennials who, speaking of the internet, who say, it drives them crazy because it makes they're working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
Right.
There's no off time. And so burnout is a huge issue. My daughter was talking to me. She was like, burnout, everybody I talk to is talking about burnout. You talk about it.
Yeah.
What is it? So for me, the boomers, we never got to talk about burnout. So I'm, so when she talks to me, she goes, everybody's burned out. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But it's real.
It is real because it's certainly a different time from the baby boomers, where it doesn't seem like we're doing things in the same way. But the problem is, and this is very specific to me because my job is completely online, and then the way I connect with my friends now is very much online centric. In other words, I know what's going on with my friends because I'm scrolling through their Instagram feed or catching up with them on Facebook. So I'm never really turning anything off. And the mind, more and more studies are coming out right now that the internet and our smartphones have an effect on our brain similar to drugs in terms of there's a chemical reaction that happens. And so when I can't now, the processes that I use for work, I'm also using for personal life, and it's becoming one big blur, and that is exhausting.
Yeah. So what do you do? How does one manage to actually, when you talk about putting boundaries down, looking at value, looking at your time, and we live in a world that expects you to respond 24/7.
Yeah. I think the first thing is to number one, understand again how you're using your time, because so many people are doing this stuff mindlessly. It's just like, I'm gonna, without thinking, pick up the phone and start scrolling through it, and then 20 minutes later you're in you've gone down a rabbit hole, right? So it's about being very conscious of how you're spending your time. I also am a huge advocate. For a long time, it's been about multitasking and how much can you get done at once. And I think that's a huge problem, and a huge cause of the larger problem of just not understanding or being conscientious of what you're doing, because you're trying to cram 4 things in at once. Like, I'll be responding to an email at work, I get a text while I'm responding to an email, I'm responding to a text, my phone will ring. So, and all these things are happening at once. So I'm doing a lot of stuff, but none of them really
are landing, and they're not landing to make you feel like, oh, I'm doing something. Yeah.
So my thing is to be very conscientious of, I'm a huge thing, don't multitask. Make conscientious decisions. I'm going to finish this report. I am not going to check my phone, and I am not going to check my email. I'm just doing this report. I've allotted 30 minutes, and then I have allotted 10 to 15 minutes to do whatever you want, the social media, check your email, and do all those things.
Right.
If you start getting these processes in place, which are not, there's a little heavy lifting at the beginning, but once you create habits, then you, just as you fell into doing multitasking, you can fall into doing things one at a time.
So she always says in here, here's the drill. I'm going to give it to you straight. Here's the drill. Well, what, Erin, is your goal really for yourself that you think you are accomplishing, whether it's with the blog, the podcast, or this book? What is it that you feel like, I'm in my zone, I'm doing X?
You mean, how do I know that I'm doing X, or how do I decide?
How do you feel like that your work is landing, and how do you want your work to land?
Oh, well, how I feel that my work is landing is I do something, people always talk about happiness, and I think happiness is great, but it's very hard to articulate or deduce what happiness really is at any one time. So for me, what I do, and I talk a little bit about this in the book, is my litmus test is how is my energy? How do I, if some, at the end of the day go, God, I'm so knocked out, or I'm so pumped up. And when I check in with myself, honestly, every night, like, what is my energy? You can be tired. If you're doing things that you love, of course you're going to be tired, but you don't want to be exhausted and knocked out. Your energy totally depleted, right? So how I know that what I'm doing is landing is if I have a good dose of tired, but my energy is still up. And so I know that the things that I'm doing in the day are working with me, are working for me. And there's also, look, no matter what you do, it's not all going to be great. You can be running the company of your dreams, you can have the family of your dreams, but you're not going to love every single piece of that. So that's not what this is about. It's not loving every single part of every single thing you do, but you want to be. You want to have an overall really positive energy towards what you're doing, right? And I know right away when something starts to feel really mundane and really grating that there's got to be a switch. Either I'm not, I'm mishandling the time that I put around this, or I've just lost an enthusiasm for it, and I need to check in and say, why have I lost enthusiasm for this?
What I like about what you're saying, Erin, is also that it's very self-empowering. It's not blaming somebody for making you feel a certain way. It's not saying it's X, Y, or Z's fault. Right. It's checking in and saying, maybe I've lost enthusiasm. Maybe I'm not in the right job.
Right.
Maybe I should make a shift. But it's bringing the power to decide back to you. And I think that that's such a things aren't being done to you.
Mm-hmm. My dad likes to say, I like to quote my dad, he says, with 100% responsibility comes 100% freedom. And of course...
Oh, pause with that. That's great. Repeat that.
With 100% responsibility comes 100% freedom. And this is an example of that. Instead of blaming other people, take ownership for where you are.
Right.
And that gives you the freedom to change it into whatever it needs to be for you. But when you start blaming people, you've given power to people that then you're beholden to them, as opposed to owning where you are in your life.
And then you resent them, you're angry at them, you yell and scream, right?
Yeah, exactly. You create chaos as opposed to calm.
So when you say, you know your work is landing, you're in the right place, what do you hope, when I talk to architects of change or people who challenge what is, imagine what can be, and move humanity forward, what is it that you're imagining with your work, and how do you feel it is moving humanity forward? I know that's big, but we all, I think, can do it in our own way.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the idea is that we are living in a very exciting / dangerous time, and it's really up to us to cultivate the former rather than the latter. And so the way we do that is to stop doing things that we think we should be doing.
Yeah.
Because is the most dangerous as it pertains to self-growth. The word should is the most dangerous word in the English language. So I think we should stop doing things we should and start doing things that feel on a very base level are right for us. And the only way we can do that is to slow down and figure out who we are and where we want to go. And I think that if we can do that as a larger collective, then we can embrace this very exciting dynamic time as opposed to being victims of it, which I feel like we're walking a very fine line as a culture right now with what's going on in the world. We've got to stop going through the motions. And so if anything, I hope that this book and what I'm doing on my podcast and in the blog sheds light on that.
Sheds light on the ability that for all of us, one, to first slow down.
Yeah.
Be.
And take stock. And be. Yeah.
Instead of just, we're not human doings. As my friend Roberta always says, you're not a human doing, you're a human being.
Exactly.
Right. Which, was kind of like, whoa, when
It's true.
I first heard that.
And one of the things that a lot of people introduce this book, including my agent and the publisher, and they say it's a productivity book.
Right.
And I said, I'm calling it a productivity book only because there is not another word that exists. Because if you look at the word productivity, we're not products, we're people.
Right.
And so that's fundamentally is a problem. We want to be productive. Well, that's product-centered as opposed to person-centered. So I'm open for suggestions on that.
Human possibility book to me.
Right, exactly.
Because
I love that.
Yeah, I think that if you, which is why I wanted to talk to you and why I like what you're doing, is that it combines both. Because I think sometimes the business world has no feeling, no emotion, no emotional intelligence, and the self-improvement thing can get you down a rabbit hole where you're only thinking about yourself. But to bridge the two, to know who you are, to know why you're here, and then to think about the possibility that is inherent in you, the possibility to do really whatever you want. And also not to fear ending up on the bathroom floor crying, right?
Exactly.
And that there are people who've been on the bathroom floor crying and who are now sitting upright, chatting. But I think so I think to me it's more about the possibility that exists in each and every one of us to do it in business or in a nonprofit, right? Wherever.
Absolutely.
So it's about getting done. But it's also about knowing who you are, and really about the strength that's within you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so the book is out, Exhaustion versus Burnout, all the things like my kids talk to me about. A lot of the things also I wanted to say that I find so many boomers my age who are really having to start over.
Yeah.
Who are having to start over and think about, I was talking to a guy last night, he's like, look, I'm a 50-year-old guy and starting over feels impossible.
It's terrifying.
Terrifying.
I did a talk 3 weeks ago at this women's kind of communal working center called the Guild, and I had no idea who was going to show up, and no exaggeration, probably 85% of the audience was over 55. Yeah. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
But and there was just...
It's this invisible majority
right.
that's out there.
Yeah. And we had a great conversation, but it's just what you said. It's like people are having to reinvent themselves. And it's very scary.
But that's why I think this book, so if you're in your 20s, like my kids were, I was talking to them the night before about a lot of what's in here, and talking to people who were in their 50s and 60s last night who were facing the same thing because they're not retiring at 60 or 65. It's too expensive to retire. And so we have to get to know ourselves again.
Right.
Check in, all the things you're advocating.
Yeah.
And start over.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's like it doesn't matter where you are in life. You got to keep checking in with yourself because your 55-year-old self is not going to have thought the same things as the 20-year-old self that was going to college. Hopefully. But it's surprising how you made a decision in your life to go to college, let's say, and do this career, and you just decided on that and never looked back. And so that's where a lot of the fear is coming up from at 50. It's like, well, I haven't checked in with myself for 30 years. That's a scary endeavor, right?
Yeah.
But it's so necessary.
I love this. Write down the names of people you want to call with great news. I call those yippee moments, right? Now, who do you dread telling your news to? It's really that basic. And so I love the book. I think what you're doing is great.
Thank you.
And it's a human possibility book with a lot of productivity notes in it. And it's focused, about why women need to stop doing it. And I think also, finally, do you find that since so much of people's work is virtual, that it's harder for people to feel like the impact of their work?
Yes.
Like, I don't really know if anything I'm doing is working because I can't really touch it.
It's not, yes.
So what do you do for that? I also feel like that a little bit. Like I never really know.
I know. It's so funny when because I have this pretty big blog, and of course I know through the numbers that there are a lot of people going there. But it was so meaningless. And then I remember on the same day, I got an email from Forbes magazine saying we've ranked your blog as one of the top 100 most influential blogs, along with some of the biggest, like Pinterest, like with those types of websites. And I was like, oh my God, I can't, like somebody found me. And I was so shocked, like, how did you even find me? And it dawned on me at that moment that it's just, you're so disconnected, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's kind of I think it's very difficult. I don't have the answer. I just think that it's important when you're living in a virtual world to make the time, and you can find the time once you've gone over how much time you're wasting, got rid of that, to also take the time to have personal moments with people, whether it's business, obviously if it's personal, if it's family or relationship, but you've got to make the effort to find those times, because I think through those personal connections, in-person connections, that then you will have a new appreciation, in a sense, for the virtual world. Yeah. But if you're living exclusively, more or less, in the virtual world, there's no point of relativity. And so it's important to get those in-person meetings and connections, like we're even doing right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though we're having a personal moment and it is, digital.
But it's good. But
to talk it is so nice. And then it's refreshing for me to go back and sit on my computer for a couple hours, so the yin and yang of that. So it's important to make those things.
Well, great, Erin. I really appreciate you coming. We're going to put this up again in the Sunday paper. So if you don't get the Sunday paper, I hope you'll sign up.
I love, by the way.
Oh, great.
Thank you. I love getting it.
That's actually funny, because I was feeling, before I went out on my book tour this year, I was feeling very like, I don't know if there's anybody out there. And it was so moving to me when I went, and people would come up I've been thinking, and talk about the Sunday paper, and then I thought, okay, there really are real people who care. And so I think that that's a great reminder to find like community events or conversations with people you like, and that's the benefit of the internet age, right? That you can sit down with people whose work you admire. And that's just not because I'm Maria or you're Erin, but a lot of people are doing that everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so go out and get it. How to get I can't say it, or I should say it, Shit Done, by Erin Falconer, and her blog is Pick the Brain, and her podcast is Pick the Brain, and she's picking people's brains, and she's written a great book. So thanks for joining us, and congratulations.
Thank you so
Erin.
much.